Today is April 22nd, 2024. My name is Jo Reingold, and I'm here interviewing Marilyn Siegel Usvolk. Good afternoon, Marilyn. Thank you for being here. Tell us a little bit about your family, what you remember about your grandparents, your parents. Where did they live? What kind of work did they do while you were growing up?
I was born July 23rd, 1922, in Tyler, Texas. I was the daughter, the only daughter. I had 4 brothers. My parents moved from Baltimore, Maryland to Tyler, Texas. I had an uncle, Louis Siegel, who lived in Dallas. He was chairman of the Sunday school in Cherith, Israel. So, of course, when we moved to Dallas, we immediately joined that. However, my life started in Tyler. My mother owned a ladies' dress shop, and she was very successful. She was heavy, but people always said she was the prettiest fat lady they knew. My father manufactured dresses with 2 partners. They were written up in They Came to Stay, the book that was published here in Dallas. That was called Marcy Lee. They were around for a number of years. Then they branched off, and he decided he would work on his own. So he made the uniforms for the first Kilgore Rangerettes. He was friendly with the woman who started it. Also, above my mother's store in Tyler was an auditorium, and that's where they had the first meeting of Tyler Junior College. I said they'll never succeed, but how wrong I was. Since my mother was working, they wanted to make sure that sister, everyone called me sister then. So I took every kind of dance lesson there was. I took elocution because I thought I wanted to be an actress. I never thought that I was pretty, but I was attractive and cute. And here is when I was in Tyler. We had a recital. This is what I looked like at the age of 13 or 14. I thought I was really something. So when we decided to move to Dallas, I was going on 15 and went right into a high school. Let me see.
What brought them to Dallas?
Well, my father he figured it was time I needed to get together with more Jewish people because I was coming of date age. And of course, in those days, we were never allowed to date out of your religion. So my parents were very observant about that. And so we moved to Dallas. I was confirmed the year that we moved. So I was confirmed at Cherith, Israel, and made the acquaintance with the prettiest, best dancers, best dressed girls in Dallas, and they were gracious enough to include me. At high school, I became co-editor of the newspaper. Then I decided perhaps I would be a reporter. So I went along with that. And I was also in the pep squad, had a uniform for that, of course, went very well. I graduated high school midterm because in the 2nd grade, I was double promoted. I didn't know I was that smart, but evidently I qualified. I later was in the National Honor Society, and of course wore the famous pin that everyone had. So I graduated January 40, and I had to wait until I went to college next September. So I went to a secretarial school. I did typing and shorthand, and my oldest, I had 4 brothers. They were all getting married. My oldest sister-in-law was quite a smoker. You know, in those days, everybody smoked. And my sister-in-law said, "Sister, first thing you do when you go off to college, I want you to learn how to smoke." And I said, "Why?" She said, "Because it gives you poise." And I said, I didn't know that I didn't have poise. So I worked on that. So in the fall, I went off to the University of Texas. My father had told me I would never have to work, how wrong he was. And so I was just looking for a husband. Well, I didn't find a husband, but I did do the jitterbug, dance with some of the best dancers, and music has really been my life. I played the piano very poorly. I sang very poorly, but I did know how to project myself. So I graduated high school. Off I went to the University of Texas and stayed there. But I was ready to come home and went back to secretarial school. Yes, I did learn to have poise. Oh, this was interesting. When I was smoking, I could never inhale because I still had my tonsils. So I would have the cigarette in one hand and the drink in the other, and then came the food. Well, I preferred food over all of them, so I gave up the cigarettes, of course. So when I came back from college, that's when the war broke out. That was World War II, and I was a hostess at the first USO in Dallas, and then of course they had 7 camps around Dallas, and all the soldiers were always coming into Dallas. That's where they had their R&R. And the mural room at the Baker Hotel was just wonderful to these soldiers. Of course, they couldn't get over the fact that Dallas was dry, so they had to bring their liquor in a brown paper sack. This was the first time I had been exposed to men from other states, and of course we loved it until the New Yorkers moved in. But we finally got used to them, and they learned our Texas ways, which of course was very different from those who lived, especially in New York. And now I love them. They're wonderful. I met my husband when he was on leave in the Army. His sister and my sister-in-law were champion bridge players. And so she said, my brother is in Fort Sill. I'm trying to find a date for him. So my sister-in-law said, how about my sister-in-law? She said, that little girl I met at your house sitting on the floor. So she said, she looks like she's about 12 years old. And she said, no, she happens to be 19. But I always looked younger than I was. And I was dressed in the baby doll shorts, my hair piled on top of my head. And I did look young. I always loved being around younger people, of course. So I had a date with him, the blind date. My parents had left South Dallas. We lived on on South Boulevard in South Dallas, about a block and a half from Temple Emmanuel. And every Saturday night, they had a dance for the young Jewish people. So we all got together, so you got to know everybody in the city. So then when the USO opened, I was ready for it. I used to wear a long formal, slid down to here with the long black gloves, and I really thought I was something else. So I hate to say it, 2 of my brothers were in the service, but fortunately they never saw active duty. So it was okay. And I kissed all the boys goodbye, sent them cookies and records, and it was a good time for me. Unfortunately, I'm sorry what happened about the war, but somehow they managed to live through it. So I met my husband, and the war ended while we were dating. So he said, I'm getting out of the service. He was from Chicago. He said, should I go back to Chicago or should I stay in Dallas? I said, are you proposing to me? And he said, well, I guess so. So I said, well, where's the ring? Where's the flowers? Where's the candy? So he was a very good crap shooter. So he said, I shot craps on the ship coming home. And he said, but I lost my wallet. My wallet had gotten stolen. But he said I had traveler's checks, so I will get reimbursed. So I made sure as soon as he got that cash, we went to a wholesale jeweler. You know, the Jewish people always look for a bargain, and I knew the wholesalers. So we went up there, and fortunately, I got my ring. Very nice. So then he said, well, I went in the service when I was 18, so I haven't had a college education or anything, and I do not know what I'm good at. Well, of course, he was good at shooting a gun because he became a first lieutenant, and he fought the war with Patton. Never got to meet him, but they came through Sicily and Italy, so we knew that very well. So he had a friend who owned Sunnyland Furniture, which is still in existence. So he went to work there. We couldn't, in those days, it was very hard to find a place to live in Dallas. So my parents had since moved to University Park on Bryn Mawr. That place is still around. And so we lived with them for a while. And he was crazy about my mother. And he said, it's very easy for me to call her mom. He said, but I cannot call your dad, Dad. It just doesn't come to me. So one time my father said to me, you know what your husband calls me? I said, no, what? Hey, you. So so we lived with him for a year. They gave us the master bedroom and didn't have to pay for the food, didn't have to pay for anything. So there was still gambling and horse racing in Dallas. I think it was there one more year. So every Saturday night, we used to go to a place called Top of the Hill. And a friend of mine's father ran it. They would give you free, wonderful steaks. Didn't cost you anything. And you could gamble as little as you wanted or as much as you could. So we did pretty well with that. So then they struck oil in Tyler in East Texas, and my father got to meet a lot of the oil men, and he bought a little bit, but he was very conservative. So he kept saying, when I die, you kids will be wealthy. Unfortunately, they stopped drilling, so I think there's oil still there, but of course I will never get to see it. Maybe, as a matter of fact, one of them oil wells was named after me, Marilyn Siegel. I'm sure it's been gone for quite some time. So we got married. The following year, we bought a duplex in East Dallas with another couple. So that worked out. We were there for 7 years. And then I figured I had to get a job. So with my secretarial degree, I went to work for the Jewish Community Center, their daycare that was in Old City Park. And some of the ones who were kids there are still around. And so I was the secretary for the director. And then, of course, they moved. So then I had my daughter, Susan, and we only had a one-bedroom duplex. So we took the doors off the closet, put her baby bed in there, and that's where she slept for a while. So we stayed there for about 7 years, and then moved to off of Midway Road called Beechwood, and that was more to our accommodations. My husband worked for Sunnyland Furniture, and he had a wild sense of humor. Everybody wanted to come in and talk to him. He had the Don Rickles type of humor, but it had a little sting to it. But he was very, very clever. He could make something out of nothing. And so many of the women said, we would just go by Sunnyland if we were feeling blue to talk to Chuck. And he went over extremely. He could have been a stand-up comedian, that's for sure. Of course, I listened to all his stories. And the past few years, my personality has finally come forward, and I'm telling the jokes now. Of course, the trick is to remember the punchline, and I've gotten pretty good at that. I don't know what my voice sounds like, but I do try. So I had a daughter and 2 sons. Okay, it's a milestone for them this year. Susan is turning 75. Mark is turning 70. Scotty is turning 65. I'm now living with Scotty and Marcia. I'm sure they didn't know I was going to live this long, but that's how it turned out. I met a man who said, when you were 20 years old, did you ever think that you were going to live this long? And I said, of course not. My mother died at 60, my father at 63. Only one brother lived to his 80s. So what chance did I have? I think I would have watched my money more closely. But I believe in enjoying life. Don't wait. There's a certain time when you need to enjoy yourself. And be, of course, be conservative if you can, although I never was. And so after my husband passed, he had a bad stroke. So after he passed away, I kept him at home. But then we were living on the Ellensburg in Dallas, right across the street from W.T. White. So when we bought our home there, in the meantime, he had the Sunnyland sold to the Freeze. So he went to work for Commercial Metals, one of their scrap yards, American Iron and Metal. And I said, what do you know about scrap? He said, nothing, but I'm willing to learn. So they had him like a PR man, and then he gradually got promoted to being the manager. So then we could afford another home. So we moved to Ellensburg. And when I said I bought my home there, they said, oh, you live in Vatican Valley. I said, I don't know, why is it called that? Because there were all the Christian churches around that area, and most of the kids went to private school there. So I lived there for 42 years, and so he passed away, and I stayed there another 7 years, and then decided it was time for me to move on. Of course, my eyesight was a little bit going, so I moved into the reserve that's on Coit, and it was supposed to be an extension to Golden Acres, which was quite a distance out. So they started out being kosher and everything, but eventually that changed. So the day I went to move in, I said, but I'm starting to date again. Find me a guy. So Harry Starr had been in Dallas for a long time, and his wife had passed away about the same time as my husband. So they said he had moved in. So I said, okay, I need to meet him. So I signed up. The next day, I sashayed over to his table, and I said, would you like to come sit at my table? Well, he was a traveling salesman for 40 years, and he knew the women that he was sitting with because he had been selling them clothing. So he said, well, I'm very happy here. And I thought, okay, I've got to work on him. So the next day, I said, would you like to take a ride with me? I was still driving, of course. I was only 85. So we get in the car, and on the way back, I said, I like you. I would like to go out with you. And that's what I keep trying to tell the women. You have to make the overtures, because I found, especially with my sons, they didn't know how to approach a woman. And I said, because I think the men are afraid of rejection. So it's up to us women to be the ones to go forward. So we got together. A year and a half later, we moved in together. I went with him to Florida many times and met his children. Today, I'm so friendly with them, and they are wonderful. They are just wonderful to me. So I moved into the reserve, and they had loads of activities there. It was great. And as I say, I lived there 14 years, and I lived with him for 11. Then we shipped him back to Florida because he had very bad arthritis, and it was all been over. And he passed away. So I said, okay, I have to start all over again. So I kept busy. I've been involved in a lot of activities. The main trick is to keep your mind working. And I said, I have a remarkable memory. Names and numbers I'm not good at, but somehow you manage. If you can get past all of that, enjoy your life, be happy with what you're doing. You can always know there's a lot of bad, but if you can just think about the good in your life. Then when I moved to Flower Mound, I lived with my son and daughter-in-law. She's a nurse. He's an electronic engineer. Oh, this is cute. I have to tell you this story. He went to Texas A&M, and I would go down there, and my brothers went to Texas A&M. So the first time, some of my friends and I, we would always go there for their dances. So they put us in a male dormitory, of course. There was no curtain, so we tacked sheets up, and a couple of the girls went into the bathroom, and they came out, and they said, there's the funniest looking thing in the bathroom. It's not a commode, and it's not a basin. We don't know what it is. Well, they all came to me because they knew I grew up with 4 brothers, and I'm supposed to know all about men. So I thought, okay, I have to come up with an answer. So I said, you know what? I think that's where you brush your teeth. Well, of course, I had never seen a male latrine, and I was kind of sorry, but they actually were brushing their teeth. So that went over pretty darn well. And finally, my eyesight started to go. My hearing was not good. So they said I needed to go into assisted living. Well, when we retired, we were very comfortable. We weren't rich, but my father never said we couldn't afford anything. But even no matter what you retire with, it's going to start. I mean, today, like I went to the dentist and I needed a filling. I didn't have eye insurance or hearing insurance or dental, and it was $1,000. And I'm thinking, I don't think I'm worth it. I mean, and the same with the hearing aids. You have to invest so much money in hearing aids. And I'm thinking, sure as I do, I'll die. So that means I won't get my money's worth. So I'm just trying to get by with what I've got and try to project my personality. I love people. I love music. I love good food. I just like people. And I listen to the news. I don't want to talk about politics because to me that is a no-no. What's happening is going to happen. I feel very badly about what's happened to the Jews. You see, they said we were the chosen people. I think we were chosen to always be persecuted. So hopefully, before I leave this earth, hopefully we will have peace on earth and have everybody be good to each other. That's the most important thing. Be good to yourself and be good to everyone and do what you can to try to help them survive. I thank you so much for listening to me.
I want you to show your pictures, the rest of your photos, if you want to. A few of them anyway.
Yes, what are the other ones? Oh,
Yeah,
dear.
that's okay. Yeah. There's an article that Marilyn was highlighted in. Hold that one up so we can see it. Hold a little higher. It says, Marilyn Usvolk celebrates 101, her birthday, not too long ago. That's wonderful. Mazel tov. And that was in the Texas Jewish Post recently. That's one of the simchas. And what else do you want to show?
This was at the senior center.
Up higher.
Yes.
There you go.
One
That's
of the
a photo of
activities.
her 100th years young. It says
Yes.
at the senior center.
Yes. They have all kinds of activities there.
Mm-hmm.
This,
Beautiful.
This was, I think they're an improv class. They have once a week.
Okay.
Of course, they're all giving me parties. I'm the oldest one there.
Well, that's quite a feat.
It's a younger community,
Yeah.
and they gravitated toward me. I just had a wonderful, wonderful time. Life can be good.
Yeah.
And I
Show your proclamation. You want to hold that one? Yeah, show that one too. There we go. This is a proclamation. It says a proclamation. Is that from the city? Office of the Mayor for Marilyn Usvolk Day, which was, let's see, for her 101st birthday, born on July 23rd, 1922 in Tyler. And it's a proclamation, whereas, therefore, the mayor of the town of Flower Mound, on behalf of the members of the town council, hereby proclaim July 23rd, 2022 as Marilyn Usvolk Day in Flower Mound. That's wonderful. Hold it up higher. We can't see that. Really up high. High, high. There you go. There's the proclamation. Fantastic. Thank you. In your life, has anybody particularly, I wanted to ask you this, has anybody stood out as a mentor to you? Somebody you really looked up to or that you followed closely?
I can't cite anyone in particular, but from each of my friends, I learned something that I didn't know about. It may have been something very simple, or how to dress, or how to do your hair better, things like that, because I am so people conscious. I'm always aware of what you're wearing, how you're wearing it, how you wear your hair. And sometimes they say I overstep. And I'm just trying to help them be more attractive. But I'm finding lately, don't ever say that. If they ask you, what do you think I could do? And I'm learning.
That's okay.
So what you think is not always what you come out and say. But I do say with each one, I learned something.
Okay.
Caring and giving, that's what it's all about.
And as a final thought, can you think of anything particularly that you did as a special project or a special something you worked on that you're extremely proud of? I know you've done a lot of things.
Not really.
No?
I just say I lived through a lot of history, and I try to live in the moment. I'm not, my past is gone. Who knows what my future is? I don't worry about what's up there. I want to have heaven on earth and to try to make people happy. Enjoy what you're doing, because this is the only life you've got. Try to live in the moment.
Well, I appreciate that very much. Thank you so much, Marilyn. It's been a joy.
Thank you for having me.
Okay.